You're tuned in to the Vintage House Show, home to the original stories of the history of house music as told by the legends, pioneers, and icons. Hosted by Kevin Mega McFall, Lori Branch, and Lauren Lowry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Vintage House Show Spotlight. If you can hear my voice, that means you are tuned in with DJ Mo Mami. I'm your host of the Spotlight. And if you're watching live on our YouTube or our Twitch, welcome. If you are listening on air, you are tuned into WNUR 89.3 FM and HD1 Evanston, Chicago. As y'all know, the Vintage House Show Spotlight highlights DJs and young people, young adults making waves in music and the house music industry. And so I'm really excited today. We're going to switch it up. We're going to do things a little different. We're going to talk to a professor, someone who really is archiving music and creating spaces for young adults to sort of think critically and think about how they engage with the music and the world of music around them. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sarah Bruno to the Vintage House Show. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey.
Dr. Bruno. Is it okay if I call you Dr. Bruno throughout the stream?
Yeah, for sure.
Dr.
I guess.
Looking real efficient with the headset. Like, I feel like you're about to give us like the syllabus lesson right now.
I feel like every time I come on like something, I have to put on some type of spicy headset. I think one time I pulled up with like a hand pink phone just to make it interesting for myself at this point.
Yes.
If I'm gonna do it, might as well.
You have to get into character. You have to get into the headspace to exactly. So tell us more about yourself, your personal background, where you from, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, so I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, and I am Afro Puerto Rican from the south side of Chicago, which is a little bit different. You know, I'm not from Humboldt Park, and I think that really did shape my coming into self through sound and through the body and through just like my connections to different communities as well in the city. I went to college on an urban arts and hip hop scholarship. So I grew up doing spoken word, competing in slam poetry, being around hip hop. And for me, that really married academia and music in a way that I haven't been able to disentangle yet. And from there, I went to grad school. I got my PhD in cultural anthropology. I wrote my dissertation on Afro Puerto Rican bomba, which is the oldest Black genre and genre of music in Puerto Rico. And now I did a couple postdocs. I did a little tour around the US. Unfortunately, I was just moving from place to place. And now I finally am back in the Midwest at Michigan State. I'm an assistant professor in Black Studies and English. So I'm closer to home. And I think that's a little bit about me, I would say.
I did not know that you did spoken word and were so I do remember you when I taught at your class mentioning you rap, and I said, "Oh, where's the files? Send me the MP3."
And then I played the unreleased, the hidden files for you. Yeah. No, yeah. I think in high school I was slamming. And
Okay.
so I competed
So
in
to
Louder
you,
Than
it
a
seems
Bomb.
you care a lot about sort of the message and the words behind the music.
Yeah, I could say, yeah, I would agree with that. I'm very much about the lyrical vibe just as much as the beat, for sure. Like if
Yeah.
a person can write, if their pen game is really ill, I'm about it.
Yeah.
Like if they're raw, I'm hooked.
Yes. And it's funny because I feel I'm on the other end where I care so much about a beat. It takes me maybe like 10 times to listen to a song to start remembering some words, some lyrics. There are some
Mm,
people who right off the first listen, they know the hook. And I'm like, dang, your brain. I love the way your brain works. Cause for me, it's like I love a beat. I can remember a beat. I can remember a pattern and stuff. And so that's what I really liked about your class, seeing this fusion. And so why don't we go ahead and segue into my next question, which is talk to me about the academia. How did you get into academia, and what was it for you that said this, I want to do bomba, I want to study and teach about the African diaspora in music?
yeah, I mean, academia was an interesting turn of events for me. I feel
Mm,
like I went to school thinking I was going to be a lawyer because, like, if you're a girl and you talk a lot, they're like, she's going to be a lawyer.
period.
And it wasn't even that I talked a lot. I just questioned authority.
Mm,
Um, because I was always reading in reality. I was smart. I
right.
was like book smart, I think. And for the most part, I was just reading a book. But I think because I had questions, when people would tell me to do stuff, they were like, she's going to be a lawyer. Like
Right.
if you were a little feisty, a little
Right.
sassy,
If you were
she's
feisty
going to,
and use big words, you're gonna be a lawyer.
she's on the track, Elle Woods, L Woods from the hood, like literally. So, I tried that out. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a legal studies major, and I hated it. I don't
Mm,
know, it was not for me. I'm not gonna yuck anybody's yum. It
right.
just wasn't for me. And then I did some internships, and I realized, I need a career that will let me really do me. Like I can't just be in a seat or like in a cubicle again, not yucking people's yums. I just couldn't do
Right.
it. And so while I was on the pathway to find that out, I think it was my homeboy's partner at the time, his girl was like, Sarah, I feel like you should join McNair, which is like a trio scholarship, not scholarship, but like a scholars program to see undergrads do research and go to grad school to increase the underrepresented groups in the professoriate. And
Mm,
so I tried out McNair, I got accepted. And then basically, when you're in McNair, you get like, I don't know how it is now because of everything going on, but basically you get money for doing research and doing everything they require. So I
oh,
was I was in it for the bread, honestly, at that time. And they were like, you could research whatever you want. So I was like, okay, I was taking a lot of Caribbean courses, a lot of Puerto Rican history. And so I got a mentor who taught the Puerto Rican history class to be my like research lead. And next thing you know, I'm in McNair. And when you're in McNair to basically get the big check at the end of your undergraduate career, you have to apply to grad school. So I did. And at that point, I was like, I want to do it. They, being a professor, I didn't really know what they did for real, but
yeah.
in my head, they got to do what they
I can do
wanted.
that.
They got to read, write,
Right.
travel. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
So I was really just applying. I got into grad school. I got rejected from a couple programs too. That was
Mm,
hard, but then I got in, and I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe it because I got in at University of Wisconsin. I remember marching into the anthropology department and being like, "Did y'all mean to send this to me?"
yeah, they sure did.
Because it was a small envelope. I was looking for the big package.
The
I had
big,
that little envelope. It was
the
hidden under
manila
my
envelope.
bills.
Yeah.
2 weeks, I opened it after I had already received it because it was under bills too. So I was like, finally open it. I walked over up the hill into that little office. I said, "Hey, you mean it?" She said, "Yeah, the big package is coming." I was like, "What's in the big package, girl? Tell me." And she was like, "Oh, it's a fully funded offer because they were paying for me to go to grad school. So I didn't pay nothing." And so after I got that, I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this." And then, I mean, obviously, as you progress, it was not easy. It was really hard, like getting grant funding. Um,
Yeah, and thank you for the love. You do
oh
belong.
yeah.
Okay, you over here questioning, did y'all mean to send this? But you belong there.
I
They were
I
like,
really was. To this day, that's the funniest part of the story. I walked my happy little self into that office and said, "Did you mean to send this to me?" And she
yeah.
was like, "Yeah." But then I ended up getting, I ended up going through the program, doing the postdoc and figuring it out. But for the most part, it was like that section of like, once you're in grad school, you have to figure out what you want to study. And I
Mm,
remember going through this like period of loss, a
mm,
lot of loss. Like I had lost my dad, my
mm,
uncle, my aunt, all within the same year. Like starting off the next year, my new friends from college that had all lived on my floor, two of them had basically passed away the second year. And so it
mm.
was just a season of loss and grief piled on top of each other. Definitely some compounded trauma. Who knows at that point?
Mhm.
But I remember going to this thing my friend had invited me to. It was like during, I think it was like Latino Heritage Month.
Okay.
So sometime in September, October, and we went to the like campus, I don't know, bar that everyone goes to with their parents. And there was a group from Chicago that came in, the Bompleneras,
Mm.
where they do Bomba y Plena, and they do performances. And I remember feeling like something finally cracked, like I could feel my feelings again when that happened. I don't
Wow.
know if it was that or the UV blue, but I was deep in it.
Maybe both.
Honestly, could have been. And after that, I was like, wow, I'm gonna stay close to this art form.
Yeah.
So I wrote a collection of poems about bomba
Awesome.
afterwards. And then I kept looking for bomba. I even started looking up bomba in like slave narratives in
Mm.
Puerto Rico, looking at collections of like runaway. There's a book called Esclavos, Profugios y Cimarrones, and it's like about runaway slaves and in Puerto Rico and like rebellions. And basically, I started looking at how many of those like instances of rebellion were linked to bomba, and it was like an overwhelming amount, which
Mhm.
piqued my interest even further.
You found
But
the thread and you're like, what is
yeah, and it was something about it that would just keep coming up until I was like, wow, I really want to know like why I feel this way.
mm.
And in bomba, each rhythm has a different emotional expectation. So like
Mm.
a cuembe is like coquette. Hollandais is happy. A yuba is like
Mm.
angry or sad. And so I was like, what if I use bomba as like a method and a site to study like Black Puerto Rican feeling?
Wow.
And so that became my project. And then as far as the classroom goes and like academia, I started applying that concept of like using music as a method and site in my classrooms to teach really, really
Mm.
like what some might consider dense, complex theory. Like you're
Yeah.
talking in Black studies like McKittrick, Sylvia Windsor, and
Hmm.
linking that to like hip hop and R&B.
Yeah.
And what you saw, which is how we kept working together over the years, for sure is bringing the DJs into the classroom, because I think if you're going to
Right.
teach about music, you got to have people who work with music every day. And while I can dance, I am not musically inclined in that way.
Yeah. And I will say I had the pleasure of teaching a few of your classes actually. We had Duke University, we had Rice, I want to say, Rice University, Michigan State, the most recent back in
And you had Stanford.
and Stanford. How could I forget Stanford? And it was really cool seeing how you blended these concepts. Like you said, you're taking this really dense theory and sometimes emotional concepts as well, and you're allowing students an outlet other than just writing about it to express their understanding. And so what was really cool for me to do with the students, I'll give y'all a little breakdown, is that essentially I would go in, I would give them a DJ 101, sort of here's the basics, here's how you use the software. I would talk about my work as a DJ and what the impact that DJing has had on me and my connection to music. And then at the end of the semester, students were tasked with creating essentially a sonic essay based off of the lesson that me and Evie the Cool, shout out Evie the Cool, gave them. And so it was really cool for me, to talk about house music and teach them about my relationship to house music and hip hop music, R&B music, bringing other DJs from Chicago around the US into these classrooms, and students are hearing their mixes and are unpacking and just thinking critically about the music. And so what to you, why was that important for you, for students to understand the DJ element of music and using DJing as a tool for them in this classroom?
I think that for me, I wanted students to think about writing critically, especially in the age of like, everybody, all the professors, I don't know if y'all noticed, but all the professors were very sensitive about ChatGPT and AI, right?
Yeah,
But before that really kicked off, because like during COVID, that's when we started doing brought like with the DJ mixes in the classroom
right.
that mirrored class content. Um, for me, it started as wanting to support local community organizations during COVID if I had the like grant funds, right? But more than that, after that first go around at Stanford, I had to teach, I think it was the ethics of hip hop course at
Mm-hmm.
Duke. And that's when it was a writing course though. And I had to get students to think about writing at like scholarly writing in a different type of way. And I know that some people they think of writing as boring. They think
Mm-hmm.
of it as like just mechanical, but not necessarily embodied. And so I thought DJing would show them how to cite their sources, right? Like how to take, maybe that's when we did each DJ had, there was two DJs every other week. They would have the same set of songs, but they would have different mixes ultimately. And that was like to mirror how they could all read the same books, but have different papers, cite different parts of the book, right? And then for the sonic essay, I really wanted them to think about how to construct an argument using sound, using the music we were listening to in class, that the books we were reading was referencing, that the mixes y'all were making were like impacting them, and string them together to craft an
Mm.
argument instead of a 25-page paper.
Right.
And I think honestly, a lot of them enjoyed that more because even like the social aspect of it, right? Like throughout the years, I've noticed that the students are proud of what they do at the end of the semester or when they can finally do it, right? Like at first they're like, why are we supposed to do this? Like, can I write the paper? And I'm like, no. And they're like,
Yeah,
why not? And I'm like, because I said so.
yeah. You're like, because it's not on the curriculum. It's not on the syllabus.
Yeah, like I'm not reading it.
Right. I'm not
No.
reading 25 pages.
But instead, I'm gonna spend the time listening to the same,
Listening.
uh, which is way. It honestly takes way longer, but I feel like they're way more proud of themselves afterwards.
Mm,
Like they're
right.
like, "Oh, I sent it to my mom," or "Oh, I shared it in the group chat."
They feel empowered by this new skill that they learned, that they felt. One thing that I feel, especially when I'm teaching, teaching your students, I teach high school students as well, is that they see this software and they're just like, that's not for me. That's not something I can do. I see these DJs, that's not something I can do. But I loved, seeing them just get excited about hearing two songs in a mix, or hearing the acapella or the beat of one song, or even just like, you'd give them a question, and and I'd see their topic, and they're getting excited about finding just songs that align with it versus, trying to construct paragraphs. It's like they're taking the words and the experiences of content that already exists, and they're compiling it in a way that you do with a research journal and all these PubMeds and these scholarly articles, and you're compiling them in your essay. It's almost like you're taking Erica Badu and you're taking, Cleo Soul, and you're combining it in a mix that's essentially your essay. And I loved how you would do that.
No, yeah, there was one. I feel like my favorite ones are always the ones with the students who either surprise me. Like there was one student at Rice. They did AI does black music because they're, how like AI rappers are coming
Yeah.
out. So they started talking about like, can they replicate soul?
Mm.
And that was the whole like trajectory, talking about blues, funk, like I want to say like old hymns since like the plantation era in the deep south, and it was really dope. Another person, they were from Louisiana at Duke, and they did it on how Louisiana hip hop music. So there was Wayne in it, there was the Ghetto Boys,
Ooh.
and they had interviewed their mom. So their mom's voice was in it, and I thought that was really dope. It was really
Love that.
it was fire. And then the most recent person, he actually he's a musician, and he did it, and he called it From Jesus to Jodeci, and he was talking about
That's a fire
R
essay.
R&B's impact from the church, and it was fire. I
Wow.
literally have it saved. It was fire. And I actually had, I think I sent it to y'all. It was like he thanked y'all in the beginning. It was really great.
Oh, I did not. I must have missed that. That is so sweet. And so it's really cool. Like I said, how you would empower these students to challenge themselves, try something new, and you would bring in resources for them. And this is a show about house music where we talk about house music and just connecting house music to what's happening now or just broader topics. And I want to hear sort of what you think house music's impact is at this point in time, or how would your students ever talk about house music? Is house music something they think about as music that's rooted in the Black diaspora? I think for me, from my perspective, I think sometimes because house music is so whitewashed, people don't, if they don't know the history, they think like David Guetta created house music. And so I want to hear from your experience in academia and just as a music historian, archivist, where does house music come in the conversation in these, African studies departments?
Yeah, I think that for me, I always assume that house music is black music, especially like I would say black and brown music, but I think that's because I'm from Chicago,
Right,
right? Like if I was from, I don't know, Texas or Virginia, I might also think it's from these like
right.
people in Europe who are like remixing everything from the 80s right now and 90s, right? Like doing house mixes. I too would be confused, you
Mhm.
know? But I think just thinking about house music and Black history, it's really interesting you asked me that because I feel like, I live in Michigan now, where Detroit also is like, we do house. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm from Chicago. I feel like when you're from Chicago and you say that, you like enact the superpower anywhere you are at. I get like
You're I'm from
superhuman
Chicago
strength. I'm like,
card.
I'm from Chicago. But I think it's interesting because thinking about house, you start thinking about, I feel like my little light keeps going out and I'm gonna just let it ride. But it's
You
really
look great
it's
regardless.
ruining my vibe. But I feel like the house music in Chicago, for me, it is very much a black and brown type of culture. It honestly gives yard kickback.
Mhm.
It gives
Outside,
that. It gives outside block
it
parties.
gives block.
Okay.
It gives we're on the block.
Yes, it gives that. It gives the paletero man come in, you know.
Right.
But I do think in this particular time, it is becoming a little whitewashed if
Mm,
you're not from these particular places that are rooted in this music's like sonic like geography. You
mhm,
It's so easy, especially with like the virality of TikTok right now, and
mm.
how it's like kind of the same thing that be happening with drill, like
Ah,
where all of these beats are coming from Europe, and then they're like further low for rappers on the south side, you know what I'm saying?
mm.
And so a lot of the producers end up not being local, like, or the producers are local but
Right,
the beat makers aren't, you know what I'm saying? Like the engineers are here, but and
right.
so it's a little interesting in the way that like people in Europe become fascinated with music. They're so obsessed with Chicago. No, I'm kidding.
Talk about it. But
No,
for
they
real,
really are though. They really are though. I have the sources to back it up. Um, I stand on my claim.
yes,
But I also think the same thing can be said with Detroit. Like they
yeah,
also do have a very strong like Motown
yeah. I mean,
vibe. They
Detroit is
also
into
have like
techno.
techno.
Yeah, they
Yes.
keep techno and
And I think it's a fine line between techno and house,
oh,
TBA.
absolutely, absolutely. They are both electronic, but
Especially
it's like a different expression. It's a different tempo. It's a different part of. It's a different soul. I think.
but I think that shows how Europe confuses the two, to be
Mm,
honest, because they don't always know the difference. There is a nuance, right? Like if I hear somebody who's like a freestyle artist, I'm like, this is house. This
mm,
is not techno. Like if you're talking Lil
right.
Susie, right?
There's like
Okay.
there's like techno bounce elements, and this is where I really like that you said the word nuance. And I think that the nuances are the lines that get blurred when things get more and more far removed from their original home, original culture, original just originality. The more far removed you get, these nuances get blurred, and then you have these like tech house, genres that are primarily, white DJs, white men in these spaces. And so then the nuances get lost. And I think, now don't get me wrong, as a creative, as a DJ, as a musician, I love seeing people create and get their freak on and create a new genre or create a new something, right? But I think for me, the part that gets frustrating is when people don't honor techno's origins in Detroit, Black Detroit, and when you think about it, it's like, yeah, Detroit, the industrial city, of course it came from there. And like techno sounds like a factory line, like it sounds like where it comes from. But like you said, it gets to Europe, it gets washed down, the sound just gets cheaper, it just feels cheap. And so that's why I think the work you do is so essential in bringing people back to the root. And with that, I think what I want to talk about now is like something I think about, especially with you bringing up bomba, and it's like Puerto Rican Pride Parade this weekend in Chicago, so it's like reggaetons everywhere. And so it's like, I know reggaeton is something you've talked about a lot, and reggaeton is one of those genres that it feels like has gotten a little far removed from its roots, and we've seen it get to places and get into hands that it just really shouldn't be in.
Ooh. What? I said, ooh.
Let's talk about it.
I'm not gonna give a juicy soundbite. But making me talk about reggaeton, it gets a little. But no, I think that's true. Like just how I would say that a lot of the European engineers, and especially the DJs that you're talking about, right? Like the European male DJs, we're going on these like sold out tours, okay, in Ibiza and like all over Europe with house music, who would be like, yes, I love house, but like, have they come to Detroit? Have they come to Chicago? Have they actually like participated alongside DJs who have spent their careers like uplifting this type of music and doing work in the community that the music came from? That's that's something I'm seeing a
Yeah.
lot happening, mirroring, right, with Puerto Rico and reggaeton. Like you're starting to see a lot of people from Latin America writ large who, I don't know, they maybe might have looked down their noses a couple years ago at Puerto Rico. Maybe there's been a lot of discussion about how Puerto Ricans speak Spanish and how now, instead of being made fun of, now it's trendy because all the reggaetoneros speak the same dialect. And like, for instance, I grew up on the South Side, right? So I grew up around a lot of Mexicans who are speaking Spanish, and they would clock me for the
Mm.
words I would say. But now they love how I talk because I talk like Bad Bunny. Yeah. So it's hot to it's we're back in style, baby.
Right.
Okay. We're not they would be like, that's ghetto, and now it's cool. Okay.
Right. Like that's not how you say that. When
Right.
it's
But I think with reggaeton, there's a lot to be said about how people are definitely profiting off of this culture that they are not intimately connected to, nor
Mm,
do they care to be connected to, besides the aesthetics that will make them money,
mm,
right? Like you start to see people use a whole bunch of like Puerto Rican jerga or slang
mm,
because they dated a Puerto Rican. If you know who, if you know, you know.
mhm.
But our our reggaeton Latin pop star, she's using a lot of these like signals and signs that point to Puerto Rico, but she's not Puerto Rican at all.
Right, and
And
is
then
also not doing anything to uplift the struggles in Puerto Rico or
she's not.
extend a hand to the artists in Puerto Rico.
Absolutely not. Instead, she's doubling down on being like, this is mine too. And it's like, is it? Because now you got everybody confused and you're giving permission to a whole bunch of kids who
Mm,
are looking up to her, who are listening to her, to be like, yeah, this is my culture. It's just not though. You know what I mean? And
mhm,
also like with reggaeton, you start seeing people just call themselves reggaetoneros and they're not.
mhm.
Like you couldn't even dance to some of the music.
Yeah.
Reggaeton's becoming so whitewashed that the reggaetoneros are going back to Latin trap. They're
Mm,
like, I'm go-
that's an interesting regression or pipeline, you know? It's like
oh
because at one
yes.
point, reggaeton was the word of the
It's where
people.
all the black artists were.
I mean,
But
you
now
know,
all the
people like Tego Calderon was speaking facts. Like, yes, the beats were hitting and like the booties were shaking, but Tego Calderon was really speaking on a strife. Like reggaeton had soul, you know, and I think about that correlation with house music, where when I think of house music, I think of the house music with soul, where there was dialogue, there was uplifting messages of love instead of just samples and house beats. You know what I mean? And so now I feel that we see when it gets far removed from its origins, it's like the beat is still there. Where like with house, there's the four on the floor that's still there. The tempo is the same. With reggaeton, that doom, the doom, like that's still there. But it just the words, the soul feels gone.
yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the artists are migrating to Latin trap right now.
Mm,
They're rapping. They're going back to getting in the booth with a lot of like US rappers.
hmm.
Like for example, Elario's last like 2 albums ago, he basically remixed his own stuff and was invited like Future to feature,
Oh wow.
Wayne to feature, 50 Cent to feature. So
The early 2000s route, like
no,
that reminds
literally.
me when Daddy Yankee or like when people was just collabing like that.
And it was beautiful. I loved it. The
Yeah.
album slaps. I feel like it was every baseball player's walkout song to bat
No.
for like ever, forever. I think you could still hear it if they walk out, and you know a home run coming.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my goodness. Facts. And personally, I do love to see that. And I love to see just this cross connection across cultures, across language barriers. And I thought it was really cool when House reached, actually, this is a great segue into talking about sort of like the Latino influence in House. And, I remember growing up, yes, there was the Terry Hunter house and stuff that I grew up on, but I also grew up on a lot of freestyle and a lot of sounds that were coming out of the things Puerto Ricans were doing in New York with the Afro, Boricua house kind of Afro beat, but they're saying Latin, or they're saying Spanish words. They're saying Orisha, like prayers in Spanish. Like it was really cool. When I was growing up, the song I think about a lot is like Apaga la Luz by Tony Touch. And that to me is like, I don't know. I just imagine that's like peak Puerto Rican hood living in New York City, right? Is like listening to that in the streets. And so it's like, what would you say you've seen in the Latin influence of house music?
oh, mm. Well, I would say when I think of house music, I think it's because of my age, because I grew up on Juke,
Okay,
um,
talk about
like
it.
that I went to. But when I think of house music, I think of being in the car because
Yeah.
I'm with my people who my older folks who are driving me around listening to house,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think a lot about how it would be house music going straight into like Spanish salsa sometimes.
Ah,
And it wasn't until like, because like back then, I wasn't looking at the albums or like the cassette tapes or nothing. So now when I go back to look at like the songs of my core memory songs, like
yeah,
Lil Susie,
yeah.
right? Or Brenda K. Starr, you
Uh-huh.
realize that they were singing that like whole salsa songs
Ah,
on
yeah,
like
you're
next
right.
on the
Actually,
same albums. And
it
so
would
I'm
be like
sitting,
one freestyle housey song and then like a salsa or like a
it would be
merengue
like
after that.
special edition, like it was like one single, but everything else is like salsa.
Yeah.
Cause like for me, Brenda K. Starr, I always knew that she sung like freestyle house, but I know her Spanish songs way more. But they're all
Mm,
on the same vibe. Like they
yeah,
would all be on the same rotation.
yeah.
And I think that speaks to the Latin influence in house really because it was just another genre that was there for us, just how salsa and merengue were.
Mm,
And I think like, if you heard those like mixes out. Like I just always think of like "You're my dream girl," that one.
talk about
I feel like that's a core memory in everybody. Like
yeah,
if you're from Chicago and you don't have like a memory of that in the back seat going down Lakeshore Drive, what were you
right.
doing? What were you doing?
With like the kind of car that you had to like manually roll the window
You feel
down.
me? You had to put your elbow into that joint, like
Yes,
get that window down.
exactly.
But
Yeah, and I sometimes I don't want to say the Latin house influence gets overlooked. I just think that being from Chicago, the type of house that was coming out of Chicago was different and it was remixed by the time it got to me. I feel like a lot of the Latin house influence that I saw back in the day was from the East Coast. And then it kind of made its way back to Chicago and then Chicago did what Chicago does and like, re-immersed it into the streets and the sounds. And yeah, it was just like you said, these vocalists were vocalists who were on, like you said, like they would be doing Spanish spoken word. And then here's also on the same album a house track. And it to see the interconnectedness of it. It wasn't until I got older that I clocked it. Because when I'm younger, I'm just like, whatever, like this is a good beat, like this is a vibe. And then I got older and I was like, wait a second, like New York City been in this house conversation for a long time and not in the way people think.
right, and I think it's because like I don't know. I always, I'll give New York City their props, I guess.
He said, if I must.
If I must, there's some people who will see this and they can't believe the words that are coming out my mouth. But I do think that they have been very strong contributors of, like giving good freestyle music
Hmm.
and I'd be over here like, maybe that's freestyle in New York becomes house in Chicago,
Hmm.
dare I say it? But dare I say it? But I feel like I could see that like a lot of the Puerto Rican artists out of New York being the strong Latino influence.
Hmm.
For sure, I could see that.
Hmm.
Cause I'm also just like it's a it's also like what were folks doing here, at that time too.
Mm.
Cause then you have the transition from house to like emphasizing juke music, I feel
Yeah.
like in Chicago, especially
Mhm.
with like in our generation coming up, or even
Mhm.
like co-working. So it was like
Right.
it it became more about like the movement, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Which I feel like, house has always centered movement. And that's something when I was reading some of your biography and reading about bomba, something that you shared was how, bomba is a deep connection to the earth. And the movement and how you're stomping your feet, or like you said earlier, the expression, the emotional expression that's associated with each movement. What are some similarities outside of that, besides movement? Do you think there are other similarities between bomba and house music?
Because you sent me the questions,
Yeah.
I do have an answer.
Yes.
But if you had asked me this off the top of my head, I would have had to be like, I would have had to do my trick where I just start telling a story till the answer comes to me. But
I'm glad I sent you the questions ahead of time, because I'd be
no,
I'd
seriously,
be at
I
the
would have.
same type of time where I'm like, I know I have an answer inside me
I'd
somewhere.
be,
Give
I'd
me
be over here doing that in like interviews and stuff. I'd be like, this reminds me of a time, and I'll go on a whole journey, a ADHD side quest to
and
take
then
them to
and
the
then
answer at the end.
somewhere the gem finds you, the
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. And I'd be like, yes. But okay. I think that aside from movement, what bomba and house have in common in reality is like the way they bring people together
Mm,
and the like kind of like sonic kinship that they create amongst the listeners, and that culture of like listening. Because if you think about house and like where it was played, for me, I don't live in the generation where it was being played in the clubs all the time, unless you go to a house show or whatever.
yeah.
It was more like house parties, barbecue outside, right? Like how we said.
Like the park, at the,
So
like you said, at your tia's.
yeah, and similarly, bomba was the same way. It was
Ah,
outside. It was not inside. It's outside music. It's in the marquesina, like in the courtyards, right? The bate is always like in a communal space. It's like the Black Puerto Rican block party, right? Like basically, and they will come, and that's how you would catch up with people. That's how you would travel to go to that function, basically.
mhm.
And similarly, when you think of like, oh, somebody's having a block party, so and so's having a cookout, they having a barbecue, but oh, it's so and so's birthday, they having a taquero, we're
Right,
going. And you
right,
get there and Follow Me is playing,
right.
Like, is that vibe. And so I think that those are the things that are similar about it. Like the way that the music cultivates community through
Mm,
these sonic cultures is very similar. And I think that that is like why both are such like core memories,
mhm.
such experienced type of sounds, like feeling it in your body. And you're like, we're both able to be like, yeah, both of those are like outside music. Like,
Mhm.
oh, it's 80 degrees, put it on. So I think that's kind of like how I see the similarities, like how they're cultivating community with one another. I also think that like they have this ability to move you and move the body, even if they're singing like some sad stuff,
Yeah.
Because
Uh-huh.
it's like somebody could be like, "Oh my god, I'm crying," and the beat's like, "Dun dun 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 ding ding ding," right? Like in the in the house music. And similarly, if you're like dancing with a U-bots, you're still gonna move, right? um if if the song's about someone getting their heart broken, they're still gonna dance.
Yeah.
So I think there's different elements, obviously, sonically and instrumentally, but I
Yeah.
think when you think about the culture and the community of the rhythms, they're both similar.
And I really appreciate, I love that response, because that is something I hadn't considered. Sometimes when I think about these similarities, I'm looking at it from such a, almost molecular perspective, where I'm like, the sounds, and how are the sounds similar? Like the drums move people, right? But I love how you said they're both these community oriented sounds. Like even when someone's playing house music, their windows are down because they want the streets to hear them. It's not something people want to just listen to alone. The same way maybe like R&B or corridos or something, these are songs that you might want to get in your feels and just throw on in your living room by yourself while you're chilling. It's like house music bomba, it makes you want to get up. You almost want to share in that energy with people. And yeah, I hadn't considered that, because when I think of house music, I think of dance. I think of dancing, I think of movement, I think of transforming the music or communicating the music with your body. And I guess it's almost like a story, right? And stories are best told with an audience. Cause even at the house party or at the house parties or when you're at the park, Jackson Park or wherever, and someone's playing house music, there's the people who are dancing and they're feeling and they're interpreting. Then there's the people on the side just admiring, appreciating, just absorbing the community essence. And so I hadn't considered that.
I'm glad that I could do that. You gave me ample time to come up with something. I'm glad I could deliver.
uh, and, and and you always do. That's why I had you on here, because I really do love your perspective on music and the way you've just taken music and taken these really big, concrete, historical topics and have made it cool and accessible and understandable. You know, I think it's so easy to talk about the history of something and maybe just get lost in the facts, but it seems like at your core, a core tenet of your work is never losing the emotion behind the music or the motivation. What is the intention behind every word, behind every sound, behind every experience?
Yeah, I agree. I blame it on my Scorpio stellium, honestly. But yeah,
Let's get to the root. Let's get
that
deep.
is that is the root of the issue is my birth chart now.
Yeah.
But I think that is kind of how I think about things, especially because as someone who, like I said, I read a lot as a kid and I had a lot of feelings. I still do. I just take way more ashwagandha, but I had a lot of feelings and I would try to just figure them out. And music was always that for me. Like to navigate. It was like a roadmap to my feelings or even like how to control how I would feel, like with different playlists, playing different things. So I feel like when I'm studying music, I try to think of it in the same way as I did back then, but maybe with more theory now,
Mm. Yeah.
like, and I think something that does kind of guide me is like at the core of who I am, I know I'm not like everybody else, and I don't want to be that person who's like, I'm not like everybody else, but
And
like, right?
I think it's
Um,
important to know though what you bring to each space.
yeah,
What is it that is your thumbprint to a space, to a classroom, to an event? I think we need that. I think individuality is so essential. I think it's when you
yeah,
get into this complex of I'm different and better. Or
right.
I'm different and like you can't even live up to it. It's like, no, you're different and you admire that you bring that uniqueness in every space you go to.
And I think that's something that I try to do, right? Is like be like, I might not be like every other academic whose parents were academics, right? Who grew up knowing professors intimately and stuff. That's not who I am.
Hmm.
But I think that that is my strength because it allows me to think about if I were to send these links to my friends, to my people,
Yeah.
could they understand what I'm saying? Would they
Yeah.
care?
Hmm.
Like, how would they relate to what I'm saying? And I think that's something that's always in the back of my mind because ultimately, yeah, it's cool to be like, oh, I do all these things. But if the people around me who I love, who know me, who hold me accountable in my real life, right? Because professors are different. Like, we don't really get to clock out. But, like, if
Yeah.
these are the people I care there about, like, I don't care about a lot of people's opinions. But if
Hmm.
I care about their opinions,
Hmm.
what do they, can they understand what I'm saying? Can they follow? Would they want to put the work in to understand what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Um, and I think that's how I approach things. Like when I'm thinking about music, when I'm thinking about the theory I'm incorporating, trying not to be too dense.
Yeah.
Um,
No, because
and
academia can get very pretentious. And that's what I love about when I was in your classrooms. It just felt like you said, how can we make these really dense topics something that is understandable without losing the impact?
yeah, and I think that that's something academia tricks itself into doing, right?
Hmm.
They're like, I know all of these 15-letter words and you don't, so that makes me like better. And in reality, they be using them words to say nothing. They be
Right.
using them words to buy stuff at the Swaparama because
It's
it's not
right.
giving.
It's so counterintuitive because it's like if you have this knowledge, don't you want to share it and make it understandable for everyone? Like
No, they don't. That's
you
the thing.
go
They
around
really don't.
like you said, these big words, but you're not even teaching, you're not leaving an impact on anybody. You're just making it's very arrogant and academia can get a little arrogant and pretentious.
Yeah, they act like they're like limited edition J's and they're not. But that's not oopsie, I've lost myself. But that's that's why I'm just like I think from taking it back to the classroom. That's why in my class, I think I focus on where my students are from,
Mm,
what they do. I always try to leave some space to see like what the vibe is of the students,
yeah.
to incorporate something that they'll connect to. Because I think that's important too, is to see yourself and like know your entry point into the space so that students can relate it to themselves as well. And
Mm,
it is your job when you're a teacher, and a lot of professors don't always see themselves as teachers, to connect with your students in that way. Since professors mostly like do research, a lot of them might not see themselves as teachers, to be honest. They see it as a chore. Um, but there are enough of us that care about teaching that are always trying to be better. And that's something I've realized is like being more flexible with the syllabus to add stuff that your students will actually care about is important. And I think like ultimately that idea of wanting to connect and wanting people to connect to what I say, and like maybe they don't care about bomba, right? But now they know like a fun fact or
yeah.
something, like, or they care about something else I said in relation to bomba.
Yeah.
Like that is more important to me because I don't think it's for everybody, but I do know that it has a lot to offer in
Mm,
terms of like what it can show us, right? Like Bomba might not be everyone's jam, but the way I talk about it as a site and method to understand feelings and an archive of feelings, that might resonate with someone, right?
yeah.
They might be like, "Wow, that's like how R&B does that for us," right? If we were to look at like 90s R&B, what would that archive of feelings tell us? That's something, that I can be okay with. And I think that I'm really appreciative that you invited me on here because I was like, oh, geez. I talked to myself. I was like, oh, brother, what am I going to say?
No, I knew we've had enough conversations about music and history and things that I knew you would bring such valuable perspective. And actually, I got inspired because I was interviewed by sort of my mentor on this program, Lauren Laurie, and we talked about the importance of thought leaders and how in a movement, whether it's music, culture, activism, you need space for critical thinking and you need someone who is helping facilitate those conversations. And it immediately made me think of you and how you are encouraging a space and facilitating spaces for people to think critically with their music, with their words, with their media. And I sort of feel like we're in a critical thinking epidemic where people just do not interact with their media in a way that is meaningful. It's endless scrolls, the algorithms, the even the AIs. We're sort of in a interesting technological zone where it feels like it's like people just want everything else to make decisions or thoughts and things for them when I don't know, fun. There's just no heart in that. AI could never help you weigh out things in the same way that like your heart or your nostalgia or your experience with something can. And so I'm so happy you came on the show and shared your knowledge, your perspective, and why this work is so meaningful to you. Because like you said, maybe someone's never heard of bomba, maybe they never will, but hearing how you talk about this genre, to me, that absolutely applies to house music. I hope people think about house music in this way because it's so important to me. It's so important to my city. It's so important to, I think, the future generation of producers and DJs. I hope somewhere down the line they stumble upon this, and it's like maybe 100 years from now, and they're like, wow, look at these two thought leaders talking about, these crossovers between maybe two genres people would never think about. What does reggaeton have to do with house music? But we see even today, and sorry if I'm going on a tangent, but we have these activism movements happening right now with where we're seeing this ICE and pro-Palestine like migration, or this hybrid, this cross-pollination of activism, where it's like, what would something that's happening to a Latino community have to do to something that's happening with a Palestinian community? And then we're able to see the convergences in activism and culture. And I feel like what you do is so important, and our conversation here is important, and showing that cross-pollination of Latinidad and Afro diaspora and Chicago and house music and reggaeton, and how does it all come back to just the essence of community and expression and emotion.
Yeah. I think for me, I think that that is something, right? Like that music can show us how to relate to other people, particularly like these genres of music, because they're communal musics, right? Like communal genres. It shows us how to relate to one another, how to connect with one another. And when you're able to connect, you're able to build your capacity for understanding and to endure, right? And in that is where we find our solidarity with one another.
Ooh, you just at a bar. Yes.
I love when that happens because, girl, I am up late for you.
Yeah, thank you. And I won't push this any longer because it is 11. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your beautiful brain, your beautiful words, your beautiful insight. You really are such a gem in academia. I hope every student that has ever had you knows just how lit and cool of a professor you are. Like you are really just you're really taking academia and making it like you're taking up space in these spaces that are almost not designed for us. And you're not only in there, you're taking up space and you're making it your own. You're saying, this is how I'm going to do it. Like y'all can be boring and write papers. My students are going to DJ. And I just think that is so raw.
Thank you so much, because that is what I aim to be a little different. But sometimes I do be like, just write the paper.
Just right. Is there anything really exciting coming up you want to shout out? Is there anything we can support you on? How can we, do you have any, is there a, like, give yourself right now is your moment to like, how can we show you love and support?
Ooh, so I would say, if you want to show me love and support, you can follow Taller Entre Aguas on Instagram, because I will be dropping some big news on there. That is, it's TALLERENTREAGUAS on Instagram, and it is the Black Puerto Rican Digital Humanities like lab that I lead.
Okay.
And we are going to be dropping a lot of news. I can't announce just yet.
Right.
But it's
gotta go follow. We don't
grande, big news. And it's been like a year in the making. And it's coming to fruition. And I'll have some opportunities for a lot of folks to connect, apply, get some bread. And we love that. So that's something I would say that's like really big to support, and also that's taking up most of my life right now. I think other than that, if we're talking about Taller Entre Aguas, you can also check out the Criadas Project, which is on the T Instagram page, which is one of my digital projects that just released. And if you're into that, you can search it, see how you can use it. If you're a teacher, maybe like show your students how to use like digital archives in that way. Other than that, though, stay woke. Let me know what's up. Follow for more. I'll let you know when the book is dropping. It is
Okay,
coming soon.
best believe we'll promote it. I'll even DJ the release party because
Yeah, I was gonna have you do that anyway.
Dr. Bruno, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. You get your rest. Thank you for staying up late with the DJ to yap a little bit. And yeah, hopefully I'll catch you somewhere soon. Catch you in a classroom. I love to teach and yap, so
Catch you in the classroom in the fall, per usual.
okay. And this is me signing off. I'm not sure. I think I'm still on air, but if I'm still on air, this is Mo Mami signing off with the Vintage House Show Spotlight. We'll be back next month, every second Wednesday, right here on 89.3 FM and HD1 Evanston, Chicago. Good night, y'all.